Amara Brooks thought she knew what danger looked like, until the night she found herself bleeding at the gates of the most feared man in the city. Lorenzo Vitale was supposed to be her boss, nothing more than the cold, calculating Mafia don who owned the mansion she cleaned. But when he carried her broken body into his home, something shifted in the shadows of his carefully guarded heart. What she didn't know was that her attack wasn't random. It was a message meant to destroy him. And what he didn't know was that saving her would unravel every wall he'd built around his soul. The maid and the monster were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with someone the world wants to use against you. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to prove that love doesn't just conquer all, it burns down everything in its path. The mansion was quiet except for the wind that rattled the iron gate. Amara Brooks tucked her phone between her ear and shoulder as she locked the side door. Her grandmother's voice was tired but alert on the other end. "You took your insulin tonight, Grandma Ruth?" Amara walked down the stone path toward the staff entrance. Her feet ached after 12 hours of cleaning and cooking. "Yes, baby, stop worrying about me." Ruth's laugh was warm but fragile. "When are you coming home?" Amara reached for the gate latch. The metal was cold under her fingers. "I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Drive safe. I love you." "Love you too, Grandma." She ended the call and slipped her phone into her jacket pocket. The gate clicked open. Behind her, the mansion stood dark except for a few windows glowing gold. Mr. Vitale was home late again. The man never seemed to sleep. A shadow moved near the brick wall. Amara froze. Her heart jumped into her throat. "Hello?" Silence. She stepped through the gate onto the sidewalk. Street lights made long shadows between the cars. Everything looked normal. Maybe it was just her imagination. A hand grabbed her shoulder. "Hey!" She spun around, but another hand covered her mouth. The smell of cigarettes filled her nose. "Quiet," a man's voice hissed. Fear shot through her like ice water. She tried to scream, but the hand pressed harder. Her keys fell to the ground with a metallic clatter. The man shoved her backward. Her shoulder blade hit the brick wall hard. Pain bloomed across her back. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Pretty little maid," the man said. His face was hidden by a black mask. "Tell your boss someone's watching." He pushed again. This time her head snapped back against the wall. Stars exploded behind her eyes. The world tilted sideways. When she could focus again, footsteps were walking away, fast, but not running. The smell of cigarettes lingered in the air. Amara slid down the wall. Her legs wouldn't hold her up anymore. Warm liquid trickled down the back of her neck. Blood. She was bleeding. Her phone had fallen face down on the concrete. The screen was still lit up, still showing Grandma Ruth's contact info. She reached for it, but her hand shook too much. The gate clicked again. Headlights swept across the street like searching fingers. Lorenzo Vitale stepped out of the black sedan and nodded to Nico, his right-hand man. The meeting with the dock workers had run late. Too much talk, not enough solutions. He was tired and wanted nothing more than a glass of wine and silence. "Thank you for the ride," he told Nico. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Boss?" Nico's voice was sharp, alert. "Look." Lorenzo followed his gaze to the gate. A figure was slumped against the brick wall, small, wearing the navy jacket that all his house staff wore. His blood turned to ice. "Amara." Her name left his lips like a prayer. He ran to her side and dropped to one knee. Blood matted her dark hair. Her brown eyes were open but unfocused. She flinched when she saw him. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. I've got you." "Mr. Vitale." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't talk. Nico, call Dr. Martinez. Now." Lorenzo slid one arm under her shoulders and one under her knees. She was light as a bird. Too light. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No." He stood up with her in his arms. "You're hurt." As he carried her through the gate, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nice house, nice maid." His jaw clenched. Someone would pay for this. The study smelled like leather and old books. Lorenzo had cleared the couch so Dr. Martinez could work. The doctor was a small man with gentle hands who had been stitching up Lorenzo's people for 15 years. He never asked questions. Signora Pia, the head housekeeper, bustled around with clean towels and water. Her grey hair was pinned up tight, but her eyes were worried. 5 stitches, Doctor, Martinez announced. "She has a mild concussion. Someone needs to watch her tonight." Lorenzo stood by the window, his hands behind his back. "I will." "Mr. Vitale," Amara said from the couch. She tried to sit up, but Dr. Martinez pushed her gently back down. "Rest," the doctor said. "You lost some blood. I need to go home. My grandmother will worry." Lorenzo turned around. Amara's face was pale, except for the bruise forming on her cheekbone. Someone had hurt her, on his property, under his protection. The rage that lived in his chest stirred like a sleeping beast. "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said. Her eyes flashed. "You can't keep me here. I can, and I will." Dr. Martinez packed his bag and whispered something to Lorenzo before leaving. Signora Pia kissed Amara's forehead like a grandmother and shuffled out. They were alone. "Please," Amara said. "I just want to call my grandma and tell her I'm okay." Lorenzo sat in the chair across from her. Even hurt and scared, she had fire in her eyes. It reminded him of someone he used to know, someone he'd lost. "Call her," he said quietly. "But you stay here tonight. It's not safe out there." As Amara dialed her phone, Lorenzo's buzzed again. The same unknown number. "Nice house. Nice maid." He deleted the message and made a mental note to have Nico trace the number. Someone was playing games, and Lorenzo Vitale did not like games. Dawn light filtered through the study curtains. Amara woke up on the couch with a soft throw blanket she didn't remember asking for. Her head pounded, but the dizziness was gone. Lorenzo sat in the same chair, his eyes closed. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a grey sweater. Even asleep, he looked alert, ready. "You stayed all night," she said. His eyes opened immediately. Dark brown, like coffee. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." She sat up slowly, but alive. "Good." He stood and walked to the window. "We need to check on your grandmother." The way he said it made her stomach clench. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "I don't know, but I'm not letting you go alone." Amara's pride flared. She was 27 years old. She'd been taking care of herself and Grandma Ruth for years. She didn't need some rich man telling her what to do. "I can take care of myself," she said. Lorenzo turned around. His face was calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Someone attacked you at my gate last night, left you bleeding on the sidewalk. That someone knows where you live." His voice was quiet, deadly. "You are not going anywhere alone." The words hit her like cold water. She'd been so focused on getting home that she hadn't thought about the danger following her there. "My grandmother," she whispered. "Get dressed. We're leaving in 10 minutes." The black car smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Amara sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the harbor. Morning joggers ran along the waterfront. Normal people living normal lives. She wasn't normal anymore. She was something else now. A target. Lorenzo drove with steady hands. He hadn't spoken since they left the mansion, but she could feel his tension like electricity in the air. "Tell me about Ruth," he said suddenly. "What?" "Your grandmother. Tell me about her medication." Amara studied his profile. Strong jaw, straight nose, the kind of face that belonged on old Roman coins. "Why do you care?" "Because you care." The simple answer caught her off guard. She looked down at her hands. "She's diabetic, has been for 20 years. The insulin is expensive, but she needs it twice a day. The pharmacy delivers? We pick it up. It's cheaper that way." Lorenzo nodded. "What else?" "What do you mean?" "What else does she need? Food? Doctor visits? Help around the house?" Amara's throat tightened. "I take care of her." "I know you do." His voice was gentle. "I'm asking how." For some reason she found herself talking about Ruth's bad knee that made stairs difficult, about the grocery store 3 blocks away where they knew her by name, about the clinic where Amara volunteered twice a week to help pay for Ruth's medicine. Lorenzo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled up in front of Ruth's apartment building. "There's a message on the door," he said. Amara's blood froze. A white envelope was taped to the pharmacy pickup notice. No name, no return address. They got out of the car together. Lorenzo's hand was light on her back as they climbed the steps. His touch was warm through her jacket. The envelope contained a single sentence written in block letters. "Missed pickup. Call for redelivery." "It's from the pharmacy," Amara said with relief. But Lorenzo was looking at something else. Cigarette butts on the ground near the mailboxes. "Fresh ones." "How often do people smoke here?" he asked. "Never. Ruth hates the smell. The landlord doesn't allow it." Lorenzo pulled out his phone and took pictures of the cigarette butts. Then he opened the building door for her. "After you." Ruth Brooks was exactly what Lorenzo had expected. 88 years old, sharp as a knife, and protective of her granddaughter like a mother bear. She sat in her kitchen chair wearing a purple housecoat and fuzzy slippers, studying him with eyes that had seen everything. "So you're the boss man," she said. "Grandma," Amara warned. "What? I can't call him what he is?" Ruth's laugh was like wind chimes. "Come here, boss man, let me look at you." Lorenzo approached slowly. Ruth reached out and touched his hand with fingers that felt like paper and bird bones. "You got sad eyes," she said. "Old sadness, the kind that follows you around." Lorenzo went very still. Most people were afraid of him. Ruth Brooks was reading him like a book. "Grandma Ruth, this is Mr. Vitale," Amara said quickly. "He's letting us stay at his house for a few days while things calm down." "Things?" Ruth raised one eyebrow. "What kind of things?" Amara looked at Lorenzo. He nodded. "Someone hurt me last night," Amara said. "Mr. Vitale thinks I'll be safer at his place." Ruth's expression hardened. "Hurt you? How?" "I'm okay now. Just a bump on the head." Ruth turned to Lorenzo. "You catch the man who did it?" "Not yet," Lorenzo said. "But I will." "Good." Ruth patted his hand. "You seem like the type who keeps his promises." Something twisted in Lorenzo's chest. When was the last time someone had looked at him without fear, without wanting something? "I am," he said. While Amara helped Ruth pack a bag, Lorenzo made himself useful. He stocked the refrigerator with groceries that had been delivered while they talked. He heated up soup for Ruth's lunch. He sat quietly while Amara gave her grandmother the insulin injection. The apartment was small but clean. Family photos covered every surface. Amara as a gap-toothed kid, Ruth as a young woman in a wedding dress, an older man in military uniform who must have been Ruth's husband. "That's my Harold," Ruth said, noticing Lorenzo's gaze. "Been gone 15 years now. Good man, like you." Lorenzo's throat felt tight. "How do you know I'm good? The way you look at my granddaughter. Like she matters." Outside, a car engine idled too long. Lorenzo moved to the window and looked down. A dark sedan sat across the street. The driver wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. Lorenzo memorized the license plate. "Time to go," he said quietly. As they helped Ruth down the stairs, the sedan pulled away, slowly, like it wanted to be seen leaving. Lorenzo filed that information away too. Someone was sending messages. He had a few messages of his own to send. Back at the mansion, Dr. Martinez checked Amara's stitches, while Signora Pia fussed over Ruth like a long-lost sister. The two women bonded over tea and complaints about young people who didn't take care of themselves. "I feel fine," Amara insisted for the third time. She tried to stand up from the kitchen chair, but the room tilted sideways. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. "Sit down," Lorenzo said firmly. "I have work to do. The guest rooms need fresh sheets and dinner." "No work." His voice was calm but final. "Not until you're healed." Amara's eyes flashed. "You can't just decide that." "I can, and I did. This is my job. I need this job." Lorenzo stopped what he was doing and looked at her. Really looked. She was trying so hard to be strong, to prove she was fine, but he could see the exhaustion in her shoulders and the worry in her eyes. "Your job is safe," he said quietly. "Your salary continues. But you rest." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's an order." Nico appeared in the doorway like a shadow. "Boss, we need to talk." Lorenzo nodded and followed Nico into the hall. "The gate cameras were looped," Nico said in a low voice. "Someone knew her schedule, knew when she'd be leaving. Inside job? Maybe. Or someone's been watching for a while." Lorenzo thought about the cigarette butts at Ruth's building, the sedan with the watching driver. "Double the security," he said. "I want to know who's breathing wrong within a mile of this place." "Already done. What about the girl?" Lorenzo looked back toward the kitchen, where Amara was arguing with Signora Pia about folding laundry. "She stays close," he said, "whether she likes it or not." That night, Lorenzo carried a blanket and pillow to the chair beside the study couch. He'd offered Amara one of the guest rooms upstairs, but she'd refused. Too fancy, she'd said. Too much like accepting charity. The study was familiar to her. She'd cleaned it 100 times. It felt safer. Lorenzo understood. Sometimes familiar was the best kind of safe. He settled into the chair and opened a book. Financial reports. But Amara didn't need to know that. She was lying on her side, facing away from him. Her breathing was still too shallow, still scared. "You don't have to stay," she said into the darkness. "I know. I'll be fine alone." "I know that too." Silence stretched between them. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Thank you." Lorenzo closed his eyes and listened to her breathe. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside, for the first time in years, The mansion felt like more than just a place to sleep. It felt like home. Morning light warmed the study like honey. Amara woke up covered with a soft throw blanket she definitely hadn't asked for. The pillow under her head smelled faintly of expensive cologne. Lorenzo was gone, but the chair beside her was rumpled. A coffee cup sat on the side table, still warm. He'd watched over her all night. The thought should have annoyed her. Instead, it made something flutter in her chest, something dangerous. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Ruth shuffled into the room wearing fuzzy slippers and a mansion bathrobe that was 3 sizes too big. "That man of yours makes terrible coffee." "He's not my man, Grandma." Ruth's eyes twinkled. "If you say so." Lorenzo appeared in the doorway carrying a breakfast tray, fresh fruit, toast and eggs that smelled like heaven. He'd rolled up his shirt sleeves, and there were flower fingerprints on the dark fabric. "You cooked?" Amara asked. Signora Pia supervised. He set the tray down on the coffee table. "Eat. I should check on my clinic shift today." "Already handled. I called and told them you had a family emergency." Amara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "You called my volunteer coordinator without asking me?" "Yes." The simple answer made her want to throw something. "You can't just make decisions about my life." "I can when those decisions keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "Yesterday was random. Some junkie looking for money." Lorenzo sat down across from her. His dark eyes were steady, patient. "Random junkies don't leave anonymous text messages," he said quietly. The room went silent, except for Ruth's sharp intake of breath. "Text messages?" Amara whispered. Lorenzo showed her his phone. 2 messages from an unknown number. "Nice house," "Nice maid," and, from an hour ago, "Pretty flowers for pretty ladies." "What does that mean?" Ruth asked. Lorenzo and Amara looked at each other. Then they both stood up and rushed to the window. A delivery truck was pulling away from the mansion's front gate. On the steps sat a large bouquet of white lilies. "No card," Nico called from the doorway. "I already checked." Amara's hands shook as she reached for her phone. Ruth was sitting in the breakfast chair, her face pale. "I'm calling the police," Amara said. "No." Lorenzo's voice was quiet steel. "The police can't help with this." "What do you mean they can't help? Someone is threatening us." "Someone is threatening you to get to me." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "This is my world, Amara. My rules apply." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't just a random target. She was bait, a way to hurt the man who'd shown her kindness. "I want to go home," she whispered. "No." Lorenzo stepped closer. "Home isn't safe anymore. Here is safe. Here is a prison. Here is protection." Ruth cleared her throat. "Seems to me you're both saying the same thing different ways. The girl needs looking after. The question is how." Lorenzo knelt beside Ruth's chair. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I give you my word. No harm will come to either of you while you're under my roof." Ruth studied his face for a long moment. Then she patted his cheek with one wrinkled hand. "I believe you, boss man, but you better ask her permission before you make any more phone calls." That evening, Lorenzo found Amara in the rose garden. She was kneeling beside a flower bed, deadheading the spent blooms with kitchen scissors. The late sun caught the gold highlights in her dark hair. "Signora Pia will have your head if she catches you working," he said. "This isn't work, it's therapy." She snipped another dead flower and dropped it in a paper bag. "Ruth used to have a garden before her arthritis got bad." Lorenzo sat on the stone bench nearby. "Tell me about before." "Before what?" "Before you started working here, before Ruth got sick, before life got complicated." Amara's hands stilled on the scissors. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I want to understand who you are, not just what you do." She went back to cutting flowers. "I was in college, pre-med, wanted to be a doctor. What happened?" Ruth's insurance changed, stopped covering her medication. "I had to choose between school and keeping her alive." She shrugged like it didn't matter, but Lorenzo heard the pain in her voice. "Easy choice. You gave up your dream. I found a new dream, taking care of people who need it." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. In his world, people took what they wanted and damn the consequences. Amara had given up everything for an old woman who wasn't even her biological grandmother. Ruth had taken her in when Amara's mother died of an overdose, made her a family when she had none. "You could go back to school now," he said carefully. "I could help with—" "No." Her voice was sharp. "I don't want your money. It wouldn't be charity. It would be charity with a different name." She stood up and brushed dirt off her knees. "I know what I am to you, Mr. Vitale. I clean your house and cook your food. That's enough." Lorenzo stood too. "You're wrong." "About what?" about what you are to me. Something electric passed between them in the golden light. Amara's breath caught. Lorenzo took a step closer, then stopped himself. I lost someone once, he said quietly. My wife, Chiara. She was pregnant when she died. Amara's scissors slipped from her fingers. It was meant for me, Lorenzo continued. The bomb, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've lived with that for 3 years. Lorenzo. His first name slipped out before she could stop it. I won't lose someone else. Not because of who I am. Not because of the world I live in. They stood facing each other in the fading light. So close she could see the pain in his dark eyes. So close she could smell his cologne mixed with the scent of roses. I'm not her, Amara whispered. I know. I'm not asking to be saved. I know that too. The garden lights flickered on around them like fallen stars. Somewhere in the distance a phone rang. Reality, calling them back. I'll stay, Amara said, for now, until this is over. But I make my own choices about Ruth, about my work, about my life. Lorenzo nodded. Your choices. And when this is over, we go back to how things were. How things were, he agreed. But they both knew it was a lie. Some lines once crossed couldn't be uncrossed. Some changes were permanent. As they walked back toward the mansion, Lorenzo's phone buzzed with a new message. Pretty garden. Easy to climb. The threat had just gotten closer. 3 days passed in careful quiet. Amara helped Signora Pia with light tasks around the mansion, while Ruth held court in the sunny breakfast room, charming the gardener and making the security guards laugh. Lorenzo worked from his home office, close enough to respond to any threat but far enough to give Amara space. It felt almost normal, almost safe. Then the second bouquet arrived. Amara heard the delivery truck before she saw it. The same white van, the same cheerful driver who had no idea what kind of message he was delivering. This time, the flowers went to Ruth's apartment building. Mrs. Chen from downstairs called Ruth directly. Honey, there's a big fancy bouquet here with your name on it, the elderly woman said over the phone. Real pretty white roses. You want me to bring it up? No, Ruth said quickly, looking at Lorenzo. Don't touch it. We'll be right there. The drive to Ruth's building felt like the longest 20 minutes of Amara's life. Lorenzo drove with quiet intensity, while Nico followed in a second car. 2 other men Lorenzo trusted flanked them at traffic lights. This is crazy, Amara said as they pulled up to the building. It's just flowers. Nothing about this is just anything, Lorenzo replied. Mrs. Chen met them at the building entrance, her wrinkled face worried. I didn't touch nothing after Ruth called, but there's something else. She led them to the mailbox area. The bouquet sat on the floor in front of Ruth's mailbox, white roses tied with silver ribbon, beautiful and innocent-looking. Tucked under the ribbon was a small white card. Lorenzo pulled on latex gloves before touching anything. The card was expensive paper with elegant writing, for the lovely Mrs. Brooks. Sweet dreams. Amara's blood went cold. He knows her name, she whispered. And where she lives, Lorenzo added grimly. Nico was already on his phone calling his team to sweep the building. Within minutes, men in dark suits were checking every stairwell, every basement corner, every rooftop access. They found cigarette butts on the fire escape outside Ruth's kitchen window. Fresh ones. Same brand as before. Pack everything, Lorenzo told Amara. You're both coming home with me. Today. This time, Amara didn't argue. The guest suite in the mansion's east wing had tall windows that faced the garden and a sitting area with soft chairs that Ruth claimed immediately. Amara stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases, feeling like an intruder in a luxury hotel. This is temporary, she told Lorenzo. As temporary as you need it to be. I want that in writing. Lorenzo pulled a legal pad from the desk and sat down. Tell me your terms. Amara blinked. She'd expected him to argue, not offer to negotiate. Privacy hours. No guards at my bedroom door. Ruth and I come and go as we please during the day, with reasonable security. Define reasonable. A driver, not a parade. Lorenzo wrote it down. What else? I keep my clinic shifts. Ruth keeps her doctor appointments. We pay for our own meals. Clinic shifts with a security escort. Ruth's appointments with advance notice for route planning. Meals are included because you're guests in my home. Amara wanted to argue about the meals, but Ruth spoke up from her new favorite chair. The man's got a point, baby. Don't fight hospitality when it's offered with a good heart. Lorenzo added their agreements to the paper and signed his name at the bottom. Then he handed the pen to Amara. Your signature makes it official, he said. Amara read the paper twice before signing. Everything she'd asked for was there, written in Lorenzo's neat handwriting. No tricks, no hidden clauses. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because trust goes both ways." That night, Amara locked her bedroom door by choice, not fear. Lorenzo had given her the only spare key to the suite, a gesture that meant more than expensive flowers or fancy rooms. She was here because she chose to be, not because she had to be. The difference felt like freedom. A routine developed over the next week. Mornings began with breakfast in the sunny kitchen, where Lorenzo listened more than he spoke, and Ruth told stories about Amara's childhood that made everyone laugh. Afternoons meant clinic shifts for Amara, with Marco, one of Lorenzo's quieter men, driving her there and back. Evenings belonged to Ruth's crossword puzzles, and whatever book Lorenzo was reading aloud. His voice was different when he read, softer, the hard edges worn away by poetry and fiction. "You're good at that," Amara told him one night, as Ruth dozed in her chair. "Chiara used to fall asleep to my voice," he said quietly. "When she was pregnant, it calmed the baby." Amara's chest tightened. What was she like? Lorenzo was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. "Fierce," he said finally. "She fought me on everything, never backed down from an argument, never let me win just because of who I was." "She sounds stubborn, terrifyingly stubborn." Lorenzo's mouth curved in a sad smile. "You remind me of her sometimes." "Is that good or bad?" "It's complicated." Before Amara could ask what that meant, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number, pretty dress, easy to cut." The words hit her like ice water. She looked down at what she was wearing. It's a blue sundress Ruth had bought her for her birthday last year. She'd worn it to the clinic that morning. "Lorenzo," her voice came out as a whisper. He read the message and went very still. When he looked up, his eyes had gone flat and dangerous. "Nico," he called. His right-hand man appeared so quickly, he must have been listening from the hallway. "Someone was watching her at the clinic today," Lorenzo said. "Find out who." "Already on it, boss." But they all knew the truth. Whoever was playing these games had been close enough to touch her, close enough to hurt her. The safe distance they'd been maintaining was shrinking fast. The next morning brought what should have been a normal trip to the family-run cafe, where Lorenzo sometimes took breakfast meetings. Amara had asked to come along, curious about the world beyond the mansion walls. The cafe was warm and crowded, filled with the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee. Amara noticed how people reacted to Lorenzo's presence. Not fear exactly, but respectful attention. Conversations paused, eyes followed. "They know who you are," she observed. "Most of them." Lorenzo held out a chair for her at a corner table. "Their families have lived in this neighborhood for generations. We have an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "I protect what matters to them. They respect what matters to me." Nico had already done his sweep of the cafe and positioned himself near the front windows. Two other men Lorenzo trusted sat at nearby tables, reading newspapers and looking like ordinary customers. The owner, a woman named Maria, brought coffee without being asked. She kissed Lorenzo's cheek like a favorite nephew and fussed over Amara like a grandmother. "You're too thin," Maria declared, setting down a plate of pastries. "Lorenzo, you need to feed this girl better." "I'm trying, Maria." Amara watched the easy exchange with fascination. This wasn't the cold, dangerous man she'd expected when she first learned who Lorenzo really was. This was someone the neighborhood trusted, someone who belonged. "The tip jar is for the waitress's kids' college funds," Lorenzo explained, sliding $100 bill into the jar when Maria wasn't looking. "You do that often?" "When I can." A man in a corner booth caught Amara's attention. He'd been there when they arrived, nursing the same cup of coffee and staring at his phone. But every time she glanced over, he was looking at her reflection in the cafe window instead of his screen. "Lorenzo," she said quietly. He followed her gaze and made eye contact with Nico. His right-hand man nodded once, almost invisible. They finished their coffee in comfortable conversation, but Amara could feel the tension building beneath the surface. When they stood to leave, the man in the corner booth suddenly became very interested in his phone. Outside, Nico fell into step beside them. "Blue Honda, license plate starting with JKF, he said under his breath. "Been following us since the mansion." "Handle it quietly," Lorenzo replied. As they reached their car, Amara looked back at the cafe window. The man was gone, but a cigarette butt smoldered on the sidewalk near where he'd been parked. The same brand, the same signature. Someone was getting bolder. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep. Her blood sugar had been unpredictable all day, leaving her restless and uncomfortable. Lorenzo offered to read while Amara finished updating patient files from the clinic. "What would you like to hear?" he asked Ruth, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Something with a happy ending," Ruth said. "I'm too old for sad stories." Lorenzo chose a collection of poetry. His voice was warm in the lamplight, turning complicated words into simple music. Ruth's lined face relaxed as she listened, her breathing evening out. "That's beautiful," she murmured. "You have a gift. Thank you. Chiara was lucky to have you." Lorenzo's voice caught almost imperceptibly. "I was the lucky one." Amara looked up from her paperwork. In the soft light, with his guard down and his voice gentle, Lorenzo looked younger, more human. The dangerous mask he wore during the day was gone, replaced by something real and vulnerable. "She would have liked you," he told Ruth. "She had a thing for people who spoke their minds." "Smart woman." Ruth's eyes drifted closed. "Good man," she whispered, already half asleep. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Amara felt something shift in her chest, a wall she'd built around her heart, developing its first crack. Lorenzo caught her looking at him and held her gaze for a long moment. Something passed between them in the lamplight, something dangerous and sweet and impossible to ignore. "Thank you," Amara said quietly, "for taking care of her. Thank you for letting me." The middle of the story arrived on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. Amara was helping Nico set up extra security cameras when Lorenzo found them in the garden. His face was grim. "We need to talk," he said. They gathered in his office. Nico had files spread across the desk, photos, phone records, a map of the city with red pins marking locations. "His name is Dario Belanti," Lorenzo said without preamble. "He used to work for the Torino family before they fell apart last year." Amara studied the photo. Mid-30s, dark hair, ordinary face, the kind of man who could blend into any crowd. "What does he want?" she asked. "To hurt me by hurting you." Lorenzo's voice was matter-of-fact, but she could see the controlled rage in his eyes. "It's personal." "How personal?" "I cost him money. A lot of money. He's been looking for a way to pay me back ever since." Nico pulled out another set of photos. Cigarette butts collected from various locations, Ruth's apartment building, the mansion gate, the cafe. "Same brand every time," Nico said. "Same pattern. He watches for a while, then makes contact, building up to something bigger." "What kind of bigger?" Amara's mouth was dry. Lorenzo and Nico exchanged a look. "The kind that ends with you in danger, and me making choices I don't want to make," Lorenzo said quietly. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't just caught in the crossfire anymore. She was the target, the weapon being used against Lorenzo. "What do we do?" she asked. "We wait," Lorenzo said. "And when he makes his move, we end this." The certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in weeks. The phone call came during dinner 3 days later. Ruth was telling a story about her late husband's attempts at cooking when Lorenzo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and went very still. "Excuse me," he said, stepping out of the dining room. Amara could hear his voice in the hallway, low and controlled. When he came back, his face was carved from stone. "There's been an incident at the clinic," he said. "Someone pulled the fire alarm. Everyone had to evacuate. Was anyone hurt?" Amara was already standing. "No, but someone was asking about you specifically. A maintenance worker no one recognized." The room spun slightly. Amara gripped the back of her chair. "He's escalating," she said. "Yes." Lorenzo's voice was gentle but firm. "Which means Ruth comes here permanently. No more trips to the apartment. No more taking chances." Ruth set down her water glass. "I'm not an invalid, boss man." "No, but you're Amara's weakness, and he knows it." The blunt truth of it hit Amara like a slap. Ruth was her weak spot, her soft place, and Dario Belanti was smart enough to use that against her. "Okay," she said quietly. "Ruth stays here, but I want it in writing again. Her autonomy, her dignity, her right to make her own medical decisions." Lorenzo was already reaching for a legal pad. "Whatever you need." As they worked out the details, Amara felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was no longer a temporary guest in Lorenzo's home. She was under his protection in the most complete sense of the word. The cage door had closed, but for the first time, she was grateful for the bars. 2 weeks passed in careful routine. Ruth settled into the mansion like she'd been born there, charming the gardener into teaching her about roses and convincing Signora Pia to share family recipes. She held court in the sunny breakfast room every morning, dispensing wisdom and gossip with equal enthusiasm. Amara kept her clinic shifts. though now Marco and another guard named Tony took turns driving her. She noticed how they positioned themselves, always alert, always watching. Lorenzo worked from home more often, close enough to respond to any threat. In the evenings, he read to Ruth and made gentle conversation with Amara. The dangerous mask he wore during business hours slipped away in the domestic quiet. "You're different here," Amara told him one night as they walked through the garden. "Different how?" "Softer, more human." Lorenzo stopped beside a fountain where water danced in the moonlight. "This house has been empty for a long time. You and Ruth brought it back to life. It's your home." "No," he said quietly. "It was just a place I slept. Now it feels like home." The admission hung between them like a bridge. Neither was ready to cross. Amara could feel the pull of his gravity, the way her heart sped up when he looked at her, but she also felt the weight of everything unsaid, his grief, her fear, the world that wanted to hurt them both. "Lorenzo," she started. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. Pretty house, pretty garden, pretty couple. Too bad it won't last. Lorenzo read the message over her shoulder. His body went very still beside her. "He's watching us now," Amara whispered. "Yes. How close do you think he is?" Lorenzo looked around the garden, calculating sight lines and hiding spots with practiced eyes. Close enough. That night he posted extra guards around the mansion's perimeter, but they both knew Dario Belanti was done playing games from a distance. The real test was coming. The morning of the clinic emergency started like any other. Amara kissed Ruth goodbye after breakfast and let Marco drive her to her volunteer shift. The clinic was busy but normal. Routine checkups, medication reviews, the comfortable rhythm of helping people who needed it. Around lunchtime, her phone buzzed with a message from the clinic coordinator. "Emergency patient in exam room 3. Need your help ASAP." Amara was used to emergencies, diabetic episodes, heart palpitations, anxiety attacks. She grabbed a clipboard and headed down the hall. Exam room 3 was empty. "Hello," she called. A nurse she didn't recognize appeared in the doorway, young, blonde, nervous-looking. "Thank God you're here," the woman said. "The patient is in the back. He's having chest pains." Amara followed her toward the rear exit of the clinic. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on what. The nurse pushed open the heavy door that led to the alley behind the building. "He's out here," didn't want to come inside. Amara stepped outside into the narrow space between buildings. Dumpsters lined one wall. A loading dock sat across the alley, marked with the number 47 in faded paint. The nurse was gone. Hands grabbed Amara from behind. A hood dropped over her head, cutting off her vision. She tried to scream, but a gloved hand covered her mouth. "Quiet," a man's voice hissed, the same voice from the night at the gate. "Or your grandmother gets hurt." Terror shot through her like ice water. But underneath the fear, something else stirred. Anger. Determination. She was not going down without a fight. Her keys were still in her hand. She slashed backward with them, feeling metal connect with flesh. Someone cursed. The grip on her arms loosened for just a second. Amara twisted hard to the right and broke free. She pulled the hood off her head and ran toward the street, but more hands caught her before she'd gone 3 steps. This time, they were ready for her fight. Zip ties bit into her wrists. Someone shoved her toward a van with tinted windows, but as they dragged her past the loading dock, she managed to smear blood from her scraped wrist across the concrete pillar. A signal, a breadcrumb. Her phone had fallen when they first grabbed her, but the screen was still lit, still recording video. Marco would see the footage. Marco would tell Lorenzo. Lorenzo would come for her. As the van door slammed shut and the city disappeared, Amara held on to that certainty like a lifeline. Lorenzo Vitale did not leave his people behind. The warehouse smelled like rust and old motor oil. Amara sat in a metal chair, her wrists zip-tied behind her back. The hood was gone, but the room was mostly dark except for a few work lights that made harsh shadows on the concrete walls. Dario Belanti sat across from her, smoking the same brand of cigarettes she'd smelled that first night. Up close, he looked smaller than his photo. Ordinary, the kind of man who would disappear in a crowd. "You're prettier than your pictures," he said conversationally. Amara said nothing. "Strong, too. That was quite a fight you put up." He touched a scratch on his cheek where her keys had connected. "Your boyfriend won't like seeing you all bruised up." "He's not my boyfriend," Dario laughed. "Sure he's not. That's why he's turned half the city upside down looking for you. That's why he put you under his protection like some Mafia princess. What do you want?" "I want Lorenzo Vitale to know what it feels like to lose everything." Dario's voice went flat and cold. I want him to watch something precious get taken away, just like he did to me. What did he take from you? My business, my reputation, my future? Dario stood up and started pacing. I had a good thing going with the Torino family. Steady money. Respect. Then Vitale decided my operation was bad for the neighborhood. Amara tried to piece together what he wasn't saying. You were hurting people. I was making money. Same as him. Not the same as him. Dario backhanded her across the face. Her head snapped to the side and her cheek exploded in pain. You don't know anything about your precious Lorenzo, Dario snarled. You think he's some kind of hero? He's killed more people than you've helped at that little clinic. Amara tasted blood in her mouth. Maybe. But he doesn't hurt innocent people. Everyone's innocent until they're not. A phone rang somewhere in the darkness. Dario answered it with a sharp, "Yeah?" He listened for a moment, then smiled. "Good. Tell him he has 1 hour to come alone or his little girlfriend starts losing pieces." When he hung up, he was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Your knight in shining armor is on his way," he told Amara. "Let's see if he loves you enough to die for you." Outside, car doors slammed. Multiple engines shut off at the same time. Dario's smile faltered. "That sounds like more than one car." The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Amara heard the sound she'd been waiting for. Quick, efficient movement, no shouting, no chaos, just the deadly quiet of professionals at work. A few minutes later, the lights came back on. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, his dark suit pristine except for a small smear of something on his cuff. Behind him, Nico held a gun on 2 men who looked very unhappy. Lorenzo's eyes found Amara immediately. His face was carved from stone, but she could see the relief in his eyes when he confirmed she was alive. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "Just scared." "Good." Lorenzo turned to Dario, who was pressed against the far wall like a cornered rat. "You have something that belongs to me." "She doesn't belong to anybody," Dario said, but his voice shook. "You're right." Lorenzo pulled a knife from his jacket and cut the zip ties on Amara's wrists. "She chooses to be with me, which makes this personal." Amara rubbed her wrists where the plastic had cut into her skin. "Lorenzo, let's just go. In a minute." Lorenzo helped her stand, his hands gentle on her arms. "Are you okay to walk?" "Yes." "Good. Nico will take you to the car." "What about you?" Lorenzo's smile was sharp as a blade. "I need to have a conversation with Mr. Belanti about boundaries." Amara wanted to argue, but Nico was already guiding her toward the door. "Come on, miss. Let the boss work." As they walked outside into the cool night air, Amara heard voices behind them. Lorenzo's voice, calm and controlled, then silence. A few minutes later, Lorenzo joined them at the cars. He'd washed his hands, and his expression was peaceful. "Is it over?" Amara asked. "It's over. What happened to—" "Nothing that will keep you awake at night," Lorenzo said firmly. "Some people just need to understand that certain lines shouldn't be crossed." On the drive back to the mansion, Amara leaned against Lorenzo's shoulder and let herself shake. The fear she'd been holding back finally caught up with her. "You came for me," she whispered. "Always," Lorenzo said. "I will always come for you." The certainty in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket. For the first time in hours, Amara felt safe, but more than that, she felt something else. Something warm and dangerous and impossible to deny. She felt loved. Back at the mansion, Signora Pia fussed over the scrapes on Amara's wrists, while Ruth sat in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you, baby," Ruth whispered, holding Amara's hand. "You can't get rid of me that easy, Grandma." Lorenzo stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. When Amara looked at him, he tried to put his mask back on, but it was too late. She'd seen the truth. He'd been just as terrified as she was. "I need to talk to you," she told him. They walked to the study where this had all started, the couch where she'd slept that first night, the chair where he'd kept watch over her. "Thank you," she said. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Amara sat down on the couch and looked up at him. "You saved my life tonight. You saved your own life. That blood on the loading dock pillar, the phone video, you gave us everything we needed to find you. We make a good team." Lorenzo sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Amara, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "What I am, what I do, it will always put you in danger. There will always be another Dario Belanti, another threat." Amara's heart sank. "You're asking me to leave. I'm telling you the truth so you can make an informed choice." She studied his face in the lamplight, the strong jaw, the dark eyes that had seen too much. the mouth that read poetry to old women and gave orders that men obeyed without question. Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you asking me to leave because it's safer for me? Or because you're afraid to let yourself care about someone again? Lorenzo went very still. That's not fair. It's an honest question. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Both, Lorenzo said finally. I'm afraid of losing someone else, and I'm afraid of what loving me will cost you. Amara reached for his hand. His fingers were warm and steady, anchored to earth in a way that made her feel safe. Can I tell you something? Yes. I'm not Chiara. I'm not asking you to keep me in a glass box where nothing can hurt me. She squeezed his fingers. I'm asking you to trust me to make my own choices. About the risks, about you, about us. Us? If you want there to be an us. Lorenzo brought their joined hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I've wanted there to be an us since the moment I found you bleeding at my gate. Then stop trying to protect me from you and start trusting me to stand beside you. They kissed then, soft and careful at first, then with the desperate relief of two people who'd almost lost each other. When they broke apart, Amara rested her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Lorenzo said. God help us both. Outside, the sun was starting to rise over the harbor. A new day, a new beginning. But first, they had some choices to make about what kind of life they wanted to build together. And for the first time in years, Lorenzo Vitale was ready to choose love over fear. 3 weeks after the warehouse, life settled into something that felt almost normal. Almost. Amara woke up in her own bed, in her own room, with sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the garden she'd grown to love. But now Lorenzo's coffee cup sat beside hers on the breakfast table. Now his voice was the first thing she heard in the morning, and the last thing at night. They were together, but carefully, taking small steps towards something neither of them fully understood yet. You're thinking too loud, Ruth said from her chair by the window. She was working on a crossword puzzle, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Sorry, Grandma. What's got you all twisted up this morning? Amara looked out at the garden where Lorenzo was talking to Nico about security schedules. Even 3 weeks later, he still posted guards, still checked the cameras twice a day, still carried the weight of protecting everyone he cared about. I love him, Amara said quietly. I know that, baby. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? Ruth set down her pencil and gave Amara the look she'd been giving her since she was 7 years old. The look that meant, don't play dumb with me. That man is walking around like he's waiting for the other shoe to drop, like he's afraid to be happy because happiness might get taken away. Can you blame him? No, but I can blame you if you let his fear become your fear. Amara's chest tightened. What if something happens again? What if loving me puts him in danger this time? What if a meteor falls on the house? Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. Baby, you can't live your whole life afraid of what might happen. Sometimes you have to trust that love is stronger than fear. Before Amara could answer, Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. His dark hair was slightly mussed from the morning breeze, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up. He looked younger when he smiled at her. Good morning, he said. Morning? Amara's heart did that little flip it always did when he looked at her like she was the best part of his day. I have some news, Lorenzo said, settling into the chair across from her. Nico's team finished their security review. No more threats, no more watchers. Dario's people have scattered, so we're safe? As safe as anyone can be in this world, Ruth snorted. Translation, stop treating this place like a fortress and start treating it like a home. Lorenzo's mouth quirked up at the corner. Ruth has a point. I've been overcautious. Overcautious is one word for it, Amara said, but she was smiling. What would you like to do today? Lorenzo asked. Anywhere you want to go. No guards, no escorts, just us. The offer was small but enormous at the same time. Freedom to move through the world like normal people. Freedom to choose their own adventure. The harbor, Amara said immediately. I want to walk along the water and eat ice cream and pretend we're just two regular people on a date. You want to pretend? Well, you are two regular people, Ruth interrupted. He just happens to have an unusual job. Lorenzo laughed, the sound warm and genuine. The harbor it is. But I draw the line at pretending to be regular. I have a reputation to maintain. The harbor was crowded with families and couples enjoying the warm afternoon. Street musicians played jazz near the pier, while kids chased seagulls and vendors sold everything from hot dogs to handmade jewelry. Lorenzo bought Amara a cone of strawberry ice cream and got chocolate for himself. They walked slowly along the waterfront, their fingers linked, watching boats drift across the blue water. "This is nice," Amara said, licking ice cream off her spoon. "Which part?" "All of it. Being normal. Being together without looking over our shoulders." Lorenzo squeezed her hand. "I want to give you more of this. More ice cream dates? More everything. More ordinary moments, more choices that are just ours." They stopped at the railing overlooking the water. The breeze caught Amara's hair, and Lorenzo reached out to tuck a strand behind her ear. His touch was gentle, but she could see something deeper in his eyes, something that made her pulse quicken. "Lorenzo," she started. "I know," he said quietly. "I feel it too." They were standing close now, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with sea salt, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I want to be with you," she whispered. "Really with you. Not just living in the same house. Not just sharing breakfast and stolen kisses. I want to build something real." "So do I." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I need you to understand what that means, what my world looks like when it's not under threat. Show me." Lorenzo studied her face for a long moment, as if he was memorizing it. Then he smiled, slow and real and completely hers. "Okay," he said, "but we take it slow. We figure it out together." "Together," Amara agreed. They kissed there by the water, with the sun warm on their faces and the sound of the harbor all around them. When they broke apart, Amara felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like coming home. "I love you," Lorenzo said against her lips. "I love you too." A seagull swooped down and tried to steal Lorenzo's ice cream cone, making them both laugh and step apart. Normal problems, normal interruptions, normal life with the man she loved. For the first time in weeks, Amara let herself believe it was possible. That evening they had dinner on the mansion's terrace overlooking the garden. Signora Pia had outdone herself with homemade pasta and fresh bread that made the whole house smell like heaven. Ruth held court from her wheelchair, telling stories about Lorenzo's attempts to learn her card game, while Nico actually smiled at something she said. "This feels like family," Ruth announced, raising her wine glass in a toast. "To family," Lorenzo said, and everyone echoed the sentiment. Later, after Ruth had been helped to bed and Signora Pia had finished cleaning the kitchen, Lorenzo walked Amara to her room. They stopped outside her door, neither of them quite ready to say goodnight. "Thank you," Amara said, "for today, for giving me normal. Thank you for showing me it was possible." They kissed goodnight, soft and sweet and full of promise. When Amara closed her door, she was smiling. But as she got ready for bed, she noticed Lorenzo's footsteps in the hallway, pacing, the sound of someone who couldn't settle. She opened her door and found him standing by the window at the end of the hall, looking out at the garden where security lights made pools of yellow on the dark grass. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Old habits." Lorenzo turned toward her, and in the dim hallway light, she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I keep thinking something's too quiet, too easy. Maybe quiet and easy are good things. Maybe." Amara studied his face. "You're waiting for the other shoe to drop." "I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's how I've stayed alive this long." She walked over to stand beside him at the window. "What would it take for you to believe this is real, that we're safe?" "Time, I think. Proof that the world isn't trying to take you away from me." "How much time?" Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. I've never had something worth protecting that I was allowed to keep." The admission hit Amara like a physical blow. All his adult life, Lorenzo had been losing people. His parents when he was young, Chiara and their baby, friends who chose the wrong side of conflicts. Everyone he'd ever loved had been taken from him in one way or another. No wonder he was afraid to trust happiness. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Amara turned to face him fully. "Lorenzo, look at me." He met her eyes reluctantly. "I am choosing you," she said. "Every day, every moment, every breath. I am choosing this life with you. Not because I have to, not because you're protecting me, but because I love you and I want to be here." "Amara, I'm not Chiara, I'm not fragile, I'm not going to break if life gets hard." She reached for his hands and held them tight. "I'm asking you to trust me to stay, to trust that love doesn't always end in loss." Lorenzo's fingers tightened around hers. "I want to." "Then try. Just for tonight, try to believe that tomorrow will be good too." They stood together in the quiet hallway, holding on to each other and the fragile hope that maybe, this time, love would be enough. "Stay with me tonight," Lorenzo said quietly. "Just to sleep? Just to sleep. I sleep better when I know you're safe." Amara smiled. "Okay, but I call dibs on the left side of the bed. Deal. Lorenzo's bedroom was surprisingly simple for a man of his means. Dark wood furniture, soft grey walls, and windows that faced the garden. The bed was enormous and perfectly made, but the bedside table held a water glass and a book of poetry, not the gun Amara had half expected. "This isn't what I imagined," she said, looking around. "What did you imagine?" "I don't know. Something more intimidating?" Lorenzo pulled back the covers and handed her one of his t-shirts to sleep in. "I save intimidating for the office. This is just where I live." Amara changed in the bathroom and came back to find Lorenzo already in bed, wearing pajama pants and nothing else. The sight of his bare chest made her mouth go dry, but she managed to climb into bed without embarrassing herself. "Good night," she said, settling onto her side, facing away from him. "Good night." But neither of them slept. Amara was too aware of Lorenzo's breathing, too conscious of the warm weight of him beside her, and Lorenzo was too busy fighting the urge to pull her against him and never let go. "This was a terrible idea," he said into the darkness. "Why?" "Because you're 3 inches away from me and I'm trying very hard to be a gentleman." Amara smiled into her pillow. "What if I don't want you to be a gentleman?" "Amara." She rolled over to face him. In the dim light from the garden, she could see the desire in his eyes warring with his determination to take things slow. "I'm not asking for forever tonight," she said softly. "I'm just asking for now, for this moment, for the chance to show you that I'm not going anywhere." "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Amara leaned over and kissed him. Soft at first, then deeper when his arms came around her and pulled her closer. "I'm sure," she whispered against his lips. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were learning a new language together. Lorenzo worshipped her body with gentle hands and whispered endearments in Italian that made her heart race. Amara gave herself completely, holding nothing back, showing him with every touch that she trusted him with her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight, skin against skin, breathing in sync. "I love you," Lorenzo said, pressing kisses to her hair. "I love you too." For the first time in 3 years, Lorenzo Vitale fell asleep without checking the locks twice or listening for footsteps in the hallway. For the first time in his adult life, he trusted that morning would bring more joy than sorrow. And for the first time since her attack at the gate, Amara slept without dreaming of shadows and cigarette smoke. They slept like people who had found their home in each other. Morning came with the smell of coffee, and Signora Pia humming in the kitchen downstairs. Amara woke up in Lorenzo's arms, her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning." She tilted her head up to look at him. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years." They lay in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just holding each other in the golden morning light. Then Amara's phone buzzed with a text from the clinic. "Emergency patient coming in. Can you cover the early shift?" "Work calls," she said, showing Lorenzo the message. "Go," he said immediately. "I'll have Marco drive you." "Actually," Amara said, climbing out of bed and reaching for her clothes, "I was thinking I could drive myself. It's a beautiful day, the threat is over, and I miss having that little bit of independence." Lorenzo went very still. Alone? Alone. Like a normal person going to her normal job. She could see the protest building in his eyes, the instinctive need to keep her safe and close. But she could also see him fighting it, trying to trust her judgment, like he'd promised. "Okay," he said finally, "but you check in every hour and you call me the second anything feels wrong." "Deal." Amara leaned down and kissed him, tasting coffee and contentment on his lips. "I'll see you tonight. I'll be here." As she got dressed and prepared to leave, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Freedom. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of choice. The freedom to love someone and still be herself. It felt like victory. The clinic was buzzing with its usual controlled chaos when Amara arrived. The emergency patient turned out to be a construction worker with chest pains that were thankfully just anxiety, not a heart attack. The morning flew by in a blur of routine checkups and medication reviews. Around lunchtime, Amara stepped outside for some fresh air and to call Lorenzo as promised. "Hi," she said when he answered. "Checking in like a good girlfriend. How's your day?" "Busy but good. Yours?" "Boring meetings. Paperwork. Missing you." Amara smiled. "I'll be home by dinner." "Home," Lorenzo repeated, like he was testing the word. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. What to have for dinner, whether Ruth was winning at cards again, the new roses blooming in the garden. Normal couple conversations that felt precious because they were ordinary. When Amara hung up and turned to go back inside, she noticed a maintenance sign by the side entrance to the clinic. Bright orange, warning about wet floors. She almost ignored it, almost walked through the main entrance like she always did. But something about the sign nagged at her. It was crooked, too bright, too new, and it was blocking the security camera's view of the side door. Amara's blood went cold. She pulled out her phone and called Lorenzo back. "Something's wrong," she said as soon as he answered. "What?" "I'm at the clinic and there's a maintenance sign that doesn't belong here. It's covering the camera angle, and I have this feeling—" "Get inside. Now. Find people and stay with them until I get there." "Lorenzo, it's probably nothing." "Amara." His voice was sharp with command. "Trust your instincts and get inside right now." She was already moving toward the main entrance when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast footsteps. Running. "Someone's coming," she said into the phone, pushing through the clinic's front door into the crowded waiting room. "Stay on the line. I'm 5 minutes away." Amara looked back through the glass doors and saw a figure in maintenance coveralls walking away quickly. Baseball cap pulled low. Something familiar about the way he moved. But he was leaving, not approaching. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe she'd let Lorenzo's paranoia become her own. "False alarm," she told Lorenzo. "The maintenance guy is leaving. I think I just got spooked." "Better spooked than sorry. I'm still coming to get you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." 20 minutes later, Lorenzo's car pulled up in front of the clinic. When Amara got in, she could see the tension in his jaw and the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. "I'm sorry," she said. "I probably overreacted. You probably saved your own life." Lorenzo's voice was calm, but she could hear the controlled fear underneath. Nico checked the maintenance records. No work was scheduled for today. So the sign was fake? The sign was bait. If you'd gone through that side door, someone would have been waiting. Amara's stomach dropped. Dario's people, the ones who scattered after the warehouse. Lorenzo reached over and took her hand. "They wanted to finish what he started, but I didn't fall for it. No, you trusted your instincts and called for help. You did exactly what you should have done." They drove home in silence, both of them processing how close they'd come to losing everything they'd built. When they pulled through the mansion's gates, Amara felt a relief so strong it made her dizzy. "I want to keep working at the clinic," she said as they walked to the house. "I know, but I also want to be smart about it. Maybe we can find a compromise." Lorenzo stopped on the front steps and pulled her into his arms. "We'll figure it out together. All of it. The clinic, the security, the future. Whatever you need." "What I need is you," Amara said simply. "Everything else we can negotiate." They kissed on the steps of their home, surrounded by the garden and the life they were building together. When they broke apart, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." Inside, Ruth was waiting with tea and worried questions. Signora Pia fussed over them both like a mother hen. Nico updated security protocols with calm efficiency. It felt like family, like home, like something worth protecting. And as the sun set over the harbor, Amara realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Dario's remaining people, not of loving Lorenzo, not of the uncertain future. She was ready for whatever came next, because whatever it was, they would face it together. That night they made love with a desperate tenderness born of almost losing each other again. Afterward, as they lay wrapped around each other in the darkness, Lorenzo spoke the words that had been building in his chest all day. "Marry me." Amara went very still. "What?" "Marry me. Not because of the danger, not because of protection or safety or any of that. Marry me because I love you and I want to build a life with you." She pulled back to look at his face in the moonlight. "Lorenzo, I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, I know my world is dangerous and messy and nothing like what you planned for your life." His voice was steady but vulnerable. "But I also know that I've never been happier than I am when I wake up next to you. I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm taking care of you and Ruth. Are you sure?" Amara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I've never been more sure of anything." "What about the clinic, my work?" "We'll figure it out. Better security, different protocols, whatever it takes. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to be who you are with me." Amara thought about everything that had led them to this moment. The attack at the gate, the flowers and threats, the warehouse and the rescue, the slow building of trust and love despite impossible circumstances. She thought about Ruth's advice. Sometimes you have to trust that love is stronger than fear. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it. Lorenzo's smile was brighter than the moonlight streaming through the windows. He kissed her deeply, pouring all his relief and joy and love into the connection between them. I don't have a ring, he said against her lips. I don't need a ring. I just need you. You'll have both, the ring and me and whatever else your heart desires. They made love again, slow and sweet and full of promises. When they finally fell asleep, it was with the knowledge that they'd chosen each other completely. No more waiting for the other's shoe to drop. No more fear that happiness was too fragile to trust. Just love and the future they were brave enough to build together. In the morning, they would tell Ruth and Signora Pia and Nico. They would start planning a wedding and a life that honored both of their worlds. They would figure out how to balance safety with freedom, protection with independence. But tonight, they were just two people who had found their home in each other, and that was enough. That was everything. The morning after Lorenzo's proposal, Amara woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Ruth's delighted laughter echoing through the mansion. She found her grandmother in the kitchen, holding court while Signora Pia flipped pancakes, and Lorenzo attempted to brew coffee that didn't taste like motor oil. "There's my engaged granddaughter," Ruth announced, beaming. "How did you—" Amara started. "Honey, I've got eyes. That man's been carrying around a little velvet box for a week, and you're both glowing like Christmas trees this morning." Lorenzo set down the coffee pot and pulled the small velvet box from his pocket. "I was going to do this properly, with flowers and a speech, and now you're going to do it in your kitchen with pancake batter on your shirt," Ruth interrupted. "Which is perfect, because real love happens in kitchens and bedrooms and ordinary Tuesday mornings." Amara's eyes filled with tears as Lorenzo dropped to one knee right there on the marble floor. "Amara Brooks," he said, opening the box to reveal a perfect solitaire diamond that caught the morning light and threw rainbows on the walls. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy?" "I already said yes," she laughed, but she held out her hand anyway. The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. Lorenzo had probably memorized everything about her, from her coffee preferences to her ring size. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You're beautiful," Lorenzo said, standing up and kissing her while Signora Pia applauded and Ruth wiped her eyes. "When's the wedding?" Ruth demanded. "Soon," Lorenzo said immediately. "As soon as possible." Amara laughed. "Let me get used to being engaged first." 3 months, Lorenzo negotiated. "Spring wedding in the garden. Deal." As they ate pancakes and planned their future, Amara felt a peace settle in her chest that she'd never experienced before. This was what happiness felt like, not the desperate rush of stolen moments or the relief of avoiding danger. This was the steady, sustainable joy of building something real with someone who loved all of her. Her stubbornness, her independence, her fierce protectiveness of Ruth, her need to help people at the clinic. This was home. 2 weeks later, Amara stood in the clinic's storage room, organizing medical supplies and thinking about wedding flowers. Lorenzo had suggested roses from their garden, and Ruth had voted for something more colorful. Signora Pia wanted whatever would photograph well. The debate was ongoing and increasingly ridiculous. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. "How's your day, Mrs. Vitale-to-be?" She smiled and typed back, "Good, quiet. Ruth is teaching Nico how to play poker. I think she's hustling him." "Of course she is. Dinner at 7, can't wait. Love you too." Amara was filing insurance paperwork when Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. The kind man who had stitched up her head wound that first night looked tired but pleased. "Amara, I have some good news," he said. "The grant application you submitted last month was approved." "What grant application?" Dr. Martinez smiled. "The one for expanding our diabetes education program. Someone submitted a very comprehensive proposal in your name, backed by a significant anonymous donation." Amara's heart skipped. "How significant?" "Enough to fund the program for 5 years, enough to hire 2 more nurses and upgrade our equipment, enough to make sure no one in this neighborhood goes without insulin because they can't afford it." She didn't have to ask who the anonymous donor was. Only one person knew about her dreams of expanding the clinic's services. Only one person had the resources to make those dreams reality. "Dr. Martinez," she said carefully, "who delivered the application. A very polite young man in an expensive suit. Said he worked for someone who believed in the clinic's mission, Nico." Lorenzo had sent Nico to submit a grant proposal she'd never written, backed by money she'd never asked for. Her first instinct was to be angry. Lorenzo had made decisions about her work without consulting her. Again, but as doctor. Martinez explained the details of the program: free insulin for elderly patients, education classes for newly diagnosed diabetics, community outreach in 3 languages. Her anger faded into something warmer. Lorenzo hadn't tried to control her work or change her mission. He'd found a way to amplify it, to make her dreams bigger than she'd dared to imagine. There is one condition, Dr. Martinez added. The donor wants the program to be called the Ruth Brooks Community Diabetes Initiative. Amara's eyes filled with tears. Of course, Lorenzo would honor Ruth's name in the gift. I accept, she said quietly. All of it. That evening, Amara found Lorenzo in his study, reading through contracts with the kind of focused intensity that meant someone somewhere was about to have a very bad day, or a very profitable one. We need to talk, she said. Lorenzo looked up, immediately alert. What's wrong? Dr. Martinez told me about the grant. Lorenzo set down his papers carefully. Are you angry? I should be. But you're not. Amara walked around the desk and settled onto his lap, something she never would have dared to do 3 months ago. Now it felt natural, like coming home. I'm grateful, she said, and a little overwhelmed, and incredibly impressed by your sneakiness. I wanted to give you something that mattered, not jewelry or clothes or things you don't need. I wanted to give you the ability to help more people. You gave me my grandmother's name on a program that will help hundreds of families. Lorenzo's arms tightened around her. Ruth raised you to be the woman I fell in love with. It seemed appropriate. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the masculine richness of his study and the weight of the future they were planning together. Lorenzo, Amara said eventually. Yes? I want to change my name when we get married. You want to be Amara Vitale? I want to be Dr. Amara Vitale. Lorenzo went very still. You want to go back to medical school? I want to finish what I started. I want to be the doctor this neighborhood needs. I want to run the Ruth Brooks Community Diabetes Initiative as someone who truly understands the science behind the care. Medical school is expensive, I know, and time-consuming, and I'll probably be the oldest student in my class. Amara turned to face him fully. But it's what I want, what I've always wanted. And I think Ruth would like knowing that her granddaughter became a doctor. Lorenzo studied her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. He found only determination and hope. How can I help? He asked simply. You already have. The grant proves I can balance the clinic work with bigger goals, and having you as my partner means I won't have to choose between my dreams and taking care of the people I love. Dr. Amara Vitale, Lorenzo said, testing the name. I like the sound of that. Even if it means your wife will be buried in textbooks for the next few years, especially then. I fell in love with your mind as much as your heart. I want to see what you can accomplish when nothing is holding you back. They kissed in the lamplight of his study, sealing another promise for their shared future. The engagement party was Signora Pia's idea. A small gathering in the garden on a perfect Sunday afternoon, with Ruth presiding over everything from her wheelchair like a queen holding court. The guest list was carefully curated. Dr. Martinez and his wife, Maria from the cafe and her daughter, the gardener who had taught Ruth about roses, a few of Lorenzo's business associates who had earned his trust over the years, and Nico, who had surprised everyone by bringing a date, a soft-spoken librarian named Elena who looked at him like he was better than any book she'd ever read. This is nice, Amara said, watching Ruth teach Elena how to cheat at cards while Nico pretended not to notice. This is family, Lorenzo corrected, handing her a glass of wine. They stood together on the terrace, looking out at their assembled loved ones. Not the family either of them had been born into, but the one they'd chosen and built together. I have something for you, Lorenzo said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Another surprise? A small one. He handed her an envelope with her name written in Ruth's shaky handwriting. When did Grandma give this to you? This morning. She said to open it when you were ready to believe this was all real. Amara opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Ruth's familiar script. My dearest granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means you've found your person, the one who sees all of you, your strength and your softness, your stubbornness and your grace, and loves every bit. I've watched that man look at you like you hung the moon since the day he carried you into this house. I've watched you fight your feelings for him because you were afraid of losing yourself in love. But real love doesn't make you smaller, baby. It makes you more yourself than you've ever been. Lorenzo sees your dreams and wants to make them bigger. He sees your independence and wants to protect it, not control it. He sees your heart and wants to help it grow. That's the kind of love worth keeping. Be happy, sweet girl. You deserve every good thing this world has to offer. All my love, Grandma Ruth P.S. The man asked me for permission to marry you last week. I told him he had to ask you, not me, because you belong to yourself first. But I also told him if he ever made you cry, I'd haunt him from whatever comes after this life. I think he believed me. Amara was crying by the time she finished reading, happy tears that felt like release and gratitude and joy all mixed together. She wrote this before I even said yes, she said. Ruth sees things the rest of us miss, Lorenzo said gently. She knew we belonged together before we did. She knew I was safe with you before I did. She knew I needed you before I did. They stood holding each other as the afternoon sun painted everything golden. Around them, their chosen family laughed and talked and celebrated the love that had brought them all together. I'm ready, Amara said. Ready for what? All of it. The wedding, the marriage, medical school, the future, all of it. Lorenzo spun her around right there on the terrace, making her laugh and causing Ruth to cheer from her wheelchair. Then let's get started, he said. 3 months later, the garden wedding was everything Amara had dreamed of, and nothing like she'd expected. Small and intimate, with white roses climbing the arbor where they exchanged vows and Ruth officiating because she'd gotten herself ordained online specifically for the occasion. You may now kiss your wife, boss man, Ruth announced after they'd promised to love and protect and cherish each other for all their days. Lorenzo kissed Amara with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred things. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. I love you, Dr. Vitale, he whispered. I love you too, Mr. Vitale. The reception was held on the terrace, with dancing under string lights and Signora Pia's famous tiramisu for dessert. Ruth danced with Nico while Elena and Marco discussed their shared love of mystery novels. Dr. Martinez gave a toast about love being the best medicine, making everyone laugh. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Amara found herself alone with Lorenzo on the terrace where they'd shared so many important moments. How does it feel? He asked. How does what feel? Being married? Being Dr. Vitale? Having everything you wanted? Amara considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, she'd been a maid who slept on other people's couches and worried about paying for her grandmother's insulin. Tonight, she was a married woman with a medical school acceptance letter, a fully funded diabetes initiative, and a husband who would move mountains to make her happy. But more than that, she was part of a family, part of something bigger than herself that somehow made her more herself than she'd ever been. It feels like coming home, she said finally. To the mansion, to you, to us, to this life we built together. Lorenzo pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Welcome home, Mrs. Vitale. 6 months later, Amara's first day of medical school started at 6 a.m. with coffee made by her husband and encouragement from her grandmother, who had moved permanently into the sunny guest suite and claimed it as her own personal kingdom. You ready for this, Dr. Vitale? Ruth asked from her chair by the kitchen window. As ready as I'll ever be. Lorenzo appeared with a travel mug of coffee and a kiss that tasted like possibility. I'm proud of you. I haven't done anything yet. You chose to try. That's everything. As Amara drove to campus, in her own car, with no security escort, just like the normal person she was learning to believe she could be, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. It had started with violence and fear, with a stranger's attack and a dangerous man's protection. But it had become something else entirely, something built on trust and choice and the daily decision to love someone fully while remaining completely yourself. The clinic's diabetes initiative was thriving under her part-time supervision. Ruth's health had stabilized with better medication and regular doctor visits. Lorenzo had learned to sleep through the night without checking the locks twice. And Amara was exactly who she'd always wanted to be, a woman in love. Her granddaughter who could provide, a student with big dreams, a partner in something real and lasting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. Knock 'em dead, Dr. Vitale. I'll be here when you get home. Home. Their word for the mansion that had started as a prison and become a sanctuary. Home. Where Ruth told stories and Signora Pia fussed and Nico smiled at text messages from Elena. Home. Where love had grown in breakfast conversations and garden walks and quiet moments when fear gave way to trust. Amara parked at the medical school and looked up at the building where she would spend the next 4 years becoming the doctor she'd always meant to be. Then she smiled, grabbed her books and walked toward her future, Sunday brunch on the terrace had become a tradition. Ruth held court from her wheelchair, dispensing advice and card game wisdom to anyone brave enough to sit down across from her. Signora Pia bustled between the kitchen and the table, making sure everyone ate enough. Nico and Elena discussed wedding plans in quiet voices, while Marco pretended to read the newspaper and actually eavesdropped on their conversation. Lorenzo grilled vegetables and watched Amara quiz herself on pharmacology with the kind of focused intensity that meant exam week was approaching. 2 years into medical school, she had hit her stride. Top of her class, beloved by professors, already being courted by residency programs. "You're going to wear a hole in that textbook," he told her, setting a plate of food at her elbow. "Final exam on Tuesday. I can't afford to mess this up." "You won't." "How do you know?" Lorenzo sat down beside her and closed the textbook gently but firmly. "Because you're brilliant. Because you've worked harder than anyone else in that program. And because I've never seen you fail at anything you truly wanted to accomplish." Amara looked around the table at their assembled family. Ruth was teaching Elena a card game that was probably illegal in most states. Nico was smiling at something Elena said, actually smiling, not just the barely there curve of lips that passed for emotion with him most days. Signora Pia was arranging flowers in a vase, humming an Italian song under her breath. Marco was solving the crossword puzzle with the kind of fierce concentration usually reserved for dismantling bombs. "I love this," Amara said quietly. "Brunch? This, us, all of it." She leaned against Lorenzo's shoulder. "Remember when you thought happiness was too dangerous to trust? I remember when you thought independence meant being alone. We were both wrong. We were both scared. And now," Lorenzo kissed the top of her head and watched Ruth cheat outrageously at cards, while Elena pretended not to notice. "Now I know that the best kind of safety comes from building something worth protecting, and the best kind of strength comes from having people who will catch you when you fall." Very philosophical for a Sunday morning. Very practical for a lifetime. Ruth's laughter carried across the terrace, followed by Elena's delighted gasp as she finally caught the older woman palming cards. Nico's quiet chuckle added a bass note to the feminine giggles. "Family meeting," Ruth announced suddenly. "Everyone gather round." They all looked at each other with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Ruth's family meetings could go anywhere from planning surprise parties to reorganizing the entire household staff schedule. "What's on your mind, Grandma?" Amara asked. "I've been thinking about legacy," Ruth said seriously. "About what we leave behind when we're gone." The table went quiet. Ruth's health was stable, but she was 90 years old. They all knew their time with her was precious. "Grandma," Amara started. "Hush, child. I'm not going anywhere yet. But I want to make sure y'all know what matters." Ruth looked around the table, her sharp eyes taking in each face. "Legacy isn't money or property or fancy titles. Legacy is the love you put into the world and the people you help become who they're meant to be." She turned to Lorenzo. "Boss man, you took a scared girl and helped her become a doctor. That's legacy." Then to Amara. "Sweet girl, you took a lonely man and helped him become someone who could love without fear. That's legacy." To Nico and Elena, "You two are learning that trust and tenderness can coexist with strength. That's legacy." To Signora Pia and Marco, "You make this house a home every single day. That's legacy." Ruth reached for Amara's hand and squeezed it with fingers that were still surprisingly strong. "But the biggest legacy of all is this table, this family we chose, this love we built together despite everything that tried to tear us apart." Her voice was firm, but gentle. "Whatever comes next, remember that love is always the right choice, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary." The table was silent except for the sound of birds in the garden and water trickling in the fountain. Then Elena started crying, which made Amara cry, which made Signora Pia tear up and reach for tissues. "Well said, Ruth," Lorenzo said quietly. "Well said." Later that afternoon, after the dishes were cleared and their family had scattered to various Sunday activities, Amara and Lorenzo walked through the garden where it had all begun. The roses were in full bloom, perfuming the air with sweetness and promise. "Ruth's right about legacy," Amara said, stopping beside the fountain where they'd had so many important conversations. "She usually is. When I was a kid, I used to dream about what I'd accomplish. Medical school residency, maybe running my own practice someday." Amara smiled. "I never dreamed about Sunday brunch with a crime boss and his chosen family." "Crime boss?" Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "I prefer business owner with a complicated portfolio." You prefer husband and grandfather figure, and the man who makes sure everyone he loves feels safe. That too. They stood together in the garden where Lorenzo had first told her about Chiara, where he'd first admitted his fears about losing someone else he loved. The garden where they'd learned to trust each other and build something real together. I have a confession, Amara said. Oh? Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I get to have all of this. You, Ruth, this house, medical school, the clinic, our weird, wonderful family. What do you do when you can't believe it? I look around the breakfast table and watch you help Ruth with her insulin injection, or I come home from class and find you reading medical journals because you want to understand what I'm learning, or I wake up next to you and remember that you choose to love me every single day, even when I'm stressed about exams or worried about Ruth or generally being difficult. Lorenzo turned to face her fully. You're never difficult. Stubborn, yes. Independent, absolutely. Passionate about things that matter always, but never difficult. I love you, she said simply. I love you too. They kissed in their garden, surrounded by roses and the life they'd built together. When they broke apart, Amara rested her forehead against Lorenzo's and smiled. Ready to go inside? She asked. I should study for a few more hours. Actually, Lorenzo said, pulling something from his pocket, I have one more surprise for you. Lorenzo, we agreed no more surprise gifts until after I graduate. This isn't from me. He handed her an envelope with her name written in Ruth's handwriting. She asked me to give this to you today. Inside the envelope was a check made out to the Ruth Brooks Community Diabetes Initiative. The amount was staggering, enough to fund the program for 20 years instead of 5. Where did this come from? Amara whispered. Ruth's been investing her Social Security and pension for the past 2 years. She said Elena taught her about compound interest, and she wanted to make sure your program would outlive her. Amara's eyes filled with tears. This is her entire life savings. This is her legacy, her way of making sure your dreams have no limits. As they walked back toward the house, Amara thought about the journey that had brought them all together. Violence had introduced her to Lorenzo, but love had made them a family. Fear had driven her into his protection, but trust had made her stay. And now they were building something that would last long after they were gone. A medical initiative that would help thousands of families. A love story that would inspire their children and grandchildren. A chosen family that proved home wasn't about blood or biology. It was about showing up for each other, day after day, year after year. Thank you, she said as they reached the back door. For what? For saving me. Amara, you saved yourself. That first night when you fought back. In the alley when you left clues for us to follow. Every day when you chose to stay and build this with me. We saved each other, she said. Yes, Lorenzo agreed, opening the door to let her into their home. We did. Inside, Ruth was napping in her chair, while afternoon sunlight painted golden squares on the floor. Signora Pia was humming in the kitchen. Nico and Elena were reading on the sofa, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. It was quiet, peaceful, normal. Everything Lorenzo had never dared to hope for, and everything Amara had never known she wanted. Home, she said softly. Home, Lorenzo agreed. And as the sun set over the harbor, painting the mansion's windows gold and rose and every color of happiness, the Vitale family settled in for another quiet evening together. Outside, the world continued to spin with all its dangers and uncertainties, but inside their chosen sanctuary, love had won. Love had always been enough. Love would always be enough.